He swore somebody was sitting at the end of their bed even though he couldn't see them.
He ran down to the desk and said, "I'm not going to stay in that room. I don't want to ever go back in there at all."
I've had guests who have awakened with a man in their room, they thought, but we've never really confirmed that.
And I could feel a coldness around me, and the building was warm.
Check to see whether your doors and windows are securely locked. Sit back in your chair and get ready to meet some local ghosts through the eyes of ghost hunter Chris Woodyard, author of a series of books about haunted Ohio.
Well, I've seen and sensed spirits all my life, and I was asked actually by my reference librarians to write a book of Ohio ghost stories. That was something they needed. I'd been thinking about it, and I said, I can do that. I've got personal experiences.
Chris materialized at the Wildwood Cultural Center on October 26th. She appeared as part of the center's local author series, sponsored by the Community Arts Commission. One of the stories in Haunted Ohio 2 is based on research by Robert Vandervelde of Menor on the Lake. Chris Woodyard claims Vandervelde is a very intrepid ghost hunter. Chris used his research material in a chapter called Haunted Punderson. Punderson State Park is a beautiful resort area with over 1,000 acres of rolling woodland centered around a gorgeous lake. The country setting has always been an attractive place for business meetings and family gatherings. Carl Long began building the manor house in 1929, but he lost his fortune during the Depression and the mansion remained unfinished. The state of Ohio purchased the property in 1948, completed the construction, and opened the building to the public for lodging and dining. It's one of the most popular resorts in the state of Ohio, and some people believe it may be haunted. According to Bob Vandervelde, the building was not only open for lodging and dining, but also for haunting. He's heard stories about Carl Long hanging himself after he lost his fortune, although our research revealed he passed away in Detroit following a 2-day illness. Some employees think they've seen his ghost hanging in the dining room late at night after the customers leave.
Quite a bright moonlit night, and they sat on the landing of the steps going into the dining room from the lobby for several hours. And Dave Arter, the dining room manager, explained to me that the man seemed to be wearing sort of a red and plaid wool shirt. And he was just hanging there stiffly, but he could see his fingers twitching as he twirled around. And they watched this apparition until dawn. And then when the sun came up, it faded away.
Vandervelde and his wife Lois spent many days and nights at the manor. They searched through various hallways and rooms where employees said mysterious things had occurred.
A lot of the maids refused to even come in this hallway.
Oh, that's right.
Even if they would lose their job, fired for not doing it, they would not come up here. Just refused. Because so many strange things happen in these rooms. My whole life I've been a journalist. And at that time I was doing some freelance writing, and it seemed like a good story. I heard about it through my wife. Somebody that worked with her had a friend by the name of Karen who was night auditor out here. And she had been talking to her friend and telling her of these spooky things that were happening. And the interesting thing is that so many of the experiences that she had happened right here in this exact same spot. As night auditor, she would start out as a desk clerk, and then around midnight, after there was no more business on the desk, she'd take the books and she'd come out here, and there was a little bench here, and she'd sit on it and work on the books. All sorts of things happened. A deliberate attempt apparently to scare her out of the place. The pictures would rattle. There was a gumball machine right over here. and it would activate itself, the slot go in and out. She'd set her pencils down, they'd fly across the room. If she'd put papers down, they would suddenly fly in the air. I remember she told me one night it got so bad that she just got so fed up. She didn't seem to be scared, though. But she just got so annoyed, she yelled out at the ghost, "Stop it!" And everything stopped for that night. Started up again, of course, the next day. We came here and stayed overnight in what was called the most haunted room. Originally called the Blue Room. It's got a different name now. Well, the worst part of it was nothing happened to us. Looks a little different than the last time we were here. They've remodeled it quite a bit. And a lot of these walls aren't what they seem. That they're really about that thick.
Yes, I remember that.
There are passages behind these walls. There seem to be hidden passages all through the building. Do you remember this one?
Yeah, I remember those
This wall
things on the wall.
has been added. The one time you could go way through there, they turned it into a closet. And remember this Pegasus up here, and how we matched up the other
On the
one?
other side, yeah.
And that's how we knew that this was connected. There's another Pegasus just like this, way at the other end of that passage.
Yeah, I remember that.
Now this is where the Plain Dealer reporter had all those terrible experiences. A reporter for the Cleveland Plain Dealer contacted me and wanted to interview me, and I told him, go out to Punishing First yourself, spend the night out there, go to the Blue Room, stay in there. So he and his girlfriend came out and checked into the Blue Room and called me the next day, and I asked him, well, how did things go? And he says, we couldn't stand it anymore. We left it around midnight. It was just too scary. In the same room where my wife and I had stayed, and nothing happened. His girlfriend was psychic, and ghosts seem to take to psychic people. They have more experience. What happened, they turned the lights out and came down to the dining room to eat. When they went back, the lights were on. It got unbearably hot. The television set, the channels kept going around and around and around. The sound would come on real loud and then go off and on and off. And they called down to the desk, and they heard one clerk say to the other, it's happening again. Another thing that used to happen every night, the door to what at that time was the men's room used to open and close around 2 o'clock every morning. The place has been remodeled now, and the men's room is no longer over there, but this same thing is going on with the big steel door separating the new and old section, big heavy fire door. It was opening and closing by itself in the wee hours of the morning.
A park ranger told Vandervelde about another happening that took place in the late 70s, a few years before the manor was remodeled.
Back in those days, this place closed for the winter. It was only open in the summer. During the winter months, when it was closed, for insurance purposes, a ranger had to stay overnight, sleep on the premises, and check the rooms. The head of the Rangers, Nick Fishback, told me one night that he was with a ranger and was going to check out the rooms with him, and they walked up this spiral staircase, and at the top of the stairs, they felt this, all of a sudden, this freezing cold wind. The temperature just dropped fantastically. Then this laughter started behind them, this cackling laughter, and it circled them, and it went on down the hall. Nick told me his first reaction was, let's run. But he said, no, he didn't dare he had to set an example for his ranger. So he said to his ranger, we're going to check out every room just as if nothing had happened. And he said that he has never been so scared in his life as when they went from room to room upstairs there. But nothing, they found nothing at all.
Many of the workers at Punderson have witnessed a number of spine-tingling incidents. Ghosts appearing and disappearing, doors opening and closing, lights going on and off. A waitress who wishes to remain anonymous told Vandervelde about several of her ghostly experiences.
I was standing at the corner of the bar doing the drawer, and out of the corner of my eye from the cherry dining room, I caught this blue-gray cloud floating across the dining room, going toward the fireplace in that room. And I looked again, and it wasn't there. The next day, the head ranger, Nick Fishbach, comes in and asks me if I had seen anything strange that evening. And I told him, yeah, I did. How did you know? He had told me that a guest staying here had reported seeing a blue-gray cloud in the shape of a woman standing right in front of her. And so I was like, oh my gosh. Because I just chalked it up to being tired. I never really thought I'd see a ghost here. Just weird stuff happens. Sitting in the corner of the dining room, there's a corner hutch. In the two closest tables, you'll put silverware down, it disappears. You put a coffee cup down, it disappears. There was a time when I was in the back looking for my schedule, and I could have swore somebody was standing behind me, there's nobody there.
I can't guarantee anybody will see anything. I've never seen anything, and I'm over here all the time, and I would love to see something. Chances are you won't, but then there's always a chance that you might.
She was called the ugliest woman in Painesville, but Mistress Suzanne had more substantial charms, namely a large fortune that attracted Joseph Ryder, the founder of what is now known as Ryder's 1812 Inn. He was in financial trouble. She was his third wife. Just 6 weeks after their marriage in 1834, the newspapers reported her death under strange and mysterious circumstances. Elaine Crane is the owner of Ryder's Inn. She's a delightfully chatty lady who obviously loves people and innkeeping. She's also a wonderful storyteller and tells some fascinating tales about the ghostly Suzanne who still roams the inn.
After her death and after the sequence of events after her death, there was a very, very strong inference that she may have been killed here in this room. And so there's a lot of feeling that Joseph may have created some bad feelings and left her unfinished. And that's why she continues to want to be the innkeeper.
The Stagecoach Inn opened in 1812 to provide shelter to weary travelers headed west. Ryder's soon became an oasis of hospitality to visitors to the Western Reserve. 10 years ago, Elaine Crane and her partner bought the inn and began the process of refurbishing the establishment. Elaine says since she took over the inn, there have been a number of strange happenings.
One of these incidences occurred during the renovation stage before we knew Suzanne existed. I was a Sunday afternoon and I was chipping antique tile off of a wall, and I was totally alone in the building. And I hit something, and the entire wall with the tile fell forward on me and sliced me across my chest so that I was bleeding. I fell backwards and my arms were pinned behind me and I was stuck. There was a radio going, there was traffic, and no one was around. And I was really, really getting worried. And I was getting dizzy. And we had a cat having kittens, then too, in the inn. And after I had just about given up, I felt something brush my hair. And when it did, it scared me, and I jumped. And when I jumped, the wall, which was lathing and tile and wood and plaster, lifted enough that I was able to get this arm out. I looked to the left, and I saw the cat. And I assumed that the cat had brushed me. I'd had this adrenaline push, and I was able to get out. Went to the hospital. They bawled me out. I had stitches. They called my husband. About 5 hours later, we were coming back here, and I said to my husband, I need to go lock the inn, and I need to clean up the mess. And so we went back into the inn, and I was telling my husband what happened, and he said, there was plaster dust all over, and there was the blood and the debris, and there were my sandal footprints. There were no cat paws prints at all, but there was a pair of woman's high heels. And my husband said, "Who helped you? Look, there's 2 sets of footprints here." And I looked at him and he looked at me, and we had no answer. That was kind of the beginning. Shortly after Suzanne's death, according to the Ryder family lore, that door that's right over there kept being opened, and they could not keep it shut. That door has been nailed shut by the family since about 1830. When we tried to open it to accommodate the building department's requirement that we have another exit from the inn, all sorts of strange things started happening. I was asleep in room 10, and my fire chief partner was asleep in room 2. We were both awakened at the same time with someone calling. We both saw lights on in the hall. We both went out to turn out the lights, thinking we'd left them on. There was another light left on, which was a candle, and you don't leave candles burning in an old building, so we went to blow it out, and it brought us down here to this room. The boiler is underneath this room. You could hear the water rushing. The bottom fell off of the hot water tank. Both of us from different parts of the building went down in the basement. I had to wade across the boiling hot water to turn it off.
Elaine told me about an incident involving an engineer from Chardon who stayed at the inn. He heard the story of Mr. Suzanne and shrugged it off.
And one night he stayed up to watch a 007 double feature. And so I let him turn the inn off when he went to bed. And he forgot the coffee pot. And when he came down the next day, the door in the dining room was wide open, blowing snow where the coffee pot was and kept it cool. And he spent the entire day with a slide rule trying to explain why that door was open. And he couldn't. And about 3 days later, having poo-pooed any story about Suzanne, he was retelling the story to some guests from the pub. There are lots of incidences that happen in an old building that you can attribute to a ghostly presence. Not true. It's the wind, or it's the building settling, or it's just plain somebody in the building you don't know.
But Elaine does know Suzanne, and Suzanne continues to play a role as part of the staff at Ryder's Inn.
We had a wedding couple that came on a Sunday night. The best man played a trick on the wedding couple and called us and canceled his room, not knowing that he was the only guest in the inn. And so we left. The next morning, my maintenance man came in early and called me at home and said, "Who's asleep in room 6? And I said, "Nobody's in room 6. He said, "Oh, yes, there is. You better get out here." Well, I was out here promptly. I knocked on their door and I asked them who they were, and they said, "You know, you are the rudest woman we've ever talked to. We know we didn't get here till 11 o'clock last night. We banged on the door, and when you were obviously in bed because you were in your white nightgown, but we asked you for a Coke and you didn't turn the lights on. All you did was point upstairs." Well, I had left at 9 o'clock. I was not here. Nobody else was in the building, and we can't explain that any other way.
Elaine says customers and guests are usually comfortable with Suzanne. She emphasizes that the inn is not really spooky. It always feels cozy, warm, and friendly. It's almost as if someone extra is taking care of you. Well, it seems as though where there's a lot of living, then the ghosts come back. They like to haunt where they lived and enjoyed life. Or perhaps they have some unfinished business, or perhaps they were very attached to a place.
We found a place on Station Street that is believed to be one of the spookiest spots in Menor. We talked to several people who claim there's a ghostly presence in this building that can make your body shiver and the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. The Matchworks building was constructed in 1858 for the Hart, Nut, and Washer Manufacturing Company. Menor Knitting Mills took it over in 1896, and various businesses, including the Columbia Match Company, used the building for factory and office work over the next 100 years. A new upscale Italian restaurant called La Sorella is located in this historical and sometimes spirited building. Before owner Gail Funk started the La Sorella restaurant, she worked as a waitress and bartender at the Perfect Match for 16 years. Gail believes the building, and particularly the restaurant, is haunted. But she also says the place is warm and cozy, and employees and customers don't seem to mind the ghostly guests.
So tell me a story about ghosts.
A server and a cook went to close the restaurant, and all the candles were out, and the cook forgot something in the kitchen, so we went through the dining room, and all the candles relit. And so he yelled for the waitress, and she came out, and they seen a gray mask floating across the window level.
So there are a lot of believers here.
Oh, yeah. Most of the old-time employees. The one time when I was here, there was 5 of us sitting in the lounge, and it was about 2:30. We were just getting ready to close, and we heard a huge crash, like all the glasses were falling down right next to us, but nothing was happening. So the 5 of us were all hanging on to each other and searched through the whole building and never found anything broken. It was just the sound of it. And then all the glasses used to rattle all the time. And it was always late at night. And that was pretty scary. We'd all run out quick when we'd hear those glasses rattling. Okay, we're out of here.
Who is the ghost?
Well, we thought it was A.M. Henryan, but now I was just told his son's name was A.M., so maybe all these years he's a little upset we've been calling him the wrong name. We've been calling him A.M. because he came out after midnight, and we thought his name was A.M. Maybe now we can lay him to rest there, huh? So to speak.
Gail's referring to John B. Henryan, the president of the Menor Knitting Mills Company. He was shot in the knitting room on the 3rd floor on January 25, 1916. It was never decided whether it was murder or suicide.
We haven't had much happen recently, except for when I was telling the story about a month ago to one of the hostesses, and she said, nobody ever told me about a ghost in here. And so I was telling her some stories about it, and all of a sudden the menus started flipping one by one. And she got kind of freaked out over that.
And ran.
Oh, she ran. Yeah, and then the previous owners, when they'd go to close, they'd turn all the fans off in the kitchen and the lights, and they'd all come back on again. There was a lot of that happening, things being turned off and coming back on.
Have you ever checked out the electricity?
They did have that checked too. And the weird thing, that's a different system there than here, and it would happen in all different areas. And the electrician said there was no problem that he could see.
No logical explanation.
No.
Is there anything about the elevators or any other parts of the building?
The elevator would go up and down, always late at night when somebody was working late in their office. They would hear creaking in the hallways and look out and nobody was there.
A gentleman who would like to remain anonymous told us about a happening that occurred late one evening as he worked alone in his office. He heard voices and laughter from the hallway. He opened his door and peered out, but found no one there. A few moments later, back in his office, he heard the sounds of a Christmas carol being sung by a barbershop quartet. He again left his office and searched through the hallways and lobby. He heard laughter again, but he found nothing.
What was the other story, though, that you had heard? Something about the tower?
Oh, that it might be a different person altogether that we keep talking about. A gentleman accidentally was hung in the tower, but we haven't been able to find any information on that.
Cindy Walker works in the building on the 1st floor. We asked her if she knew anything about the ghosts that live here.
There's only one real significant one, and that was when we first went to move into the building. And 3 of us were scouring the building, and 3 of the people went downstairs, and I decided to hang around. And I started hearing clanging and noises, and got over towards the tower. and I could tell it was something because I do believe in ghosts. And let him know that I knew he was there and it was okay, and he stopped making the noises. And there have been numerous other occasions, though, no wind out, and you can still hear the clanging. But he hasn't done anything to anybody. He just like watches the building.
Cindy says she can always tell when the ghost is around because of her ESP.
It's extrasensory perception, and it does exist. Everybody's got it, whether they use it or not, because I do believe in it completely. And it is, a lot of it is contact with the other world, that they are sending us messages.
You're watching the award-winning Menor Channel, MCTV 12.